They say the darkest days always begin like the most ordinary ones. No warnings, no signs, just routine. And in Provo, Utah, that Wednesday afternoon looked harmless. The campus of Utah Valley University buzzed with laughter, hurried footsteps, iced coffees in hand, and autumn leaves scattering across the pavement. It was so normal it almost felt boring. But what no one knew was that in just minutes, that crisp fall air would shatter like glass, and the story of an entire nation would shatter with it. First came the sound, a sharp crack that didn't belong on a college campus. For a split second, brains refused to process it. Some thought it was thunder. Others thought maybe glass had exploded somewhere. But the truth was far more sinister. Heads whipped around at the same time. Silence turned into confusion, and then came the sight no one could unsee. The man on stage, crisp white shirt, standing tall just seconds earlier, collapsed, like the life had been ripped from his chest by an invisible hand. The microphone hit the floor with a piercing squeal. His papers scattered like broken birds caught in the wind, and for a heartbeat, no one even breathed. Then chaos detonated. Students ran in every direction. Backpacks dropped. Screams tangled with the metallic clatter of cell phones raised in shaking hands, recording the unthinkable. Campus security sprinted toward the stage. Voices cracked as they shouted the same desperate words over and over. "Call 911, call 911. And at the center of it all, Charlie Kirk, 31 years old, a man who had filled stadiums, debated on national television, moved crowds with his words. Now motionless on the hardwood stage, a dark stain spreading across his pressed shirt like a shadow swallowing him whole. What goes through your mind in that moment? Politics, ideologies, debates, or just how fragile it all really is, that someone can be speaking with fire in their voice 1 second, and the next it's gone forever. Paramedics stormed through the crowd, barking orders, tearing open kits, pressing gauze into the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The metallic smell of blood cut through the autumn air, a brutal reminder this wasn't a drill. This was real. Some students sobbed in each other's arms, others filmed through tears, and many already knew what no one dared to say out loud. This wasn't an accident, this was the end. When the ambulance doors slammed shut and the sirens faded into the night, the crowd stood frozen, trapped in shock. No one spoke, until one voice whispered the words everyone was too afraid to admit. "He's dead, isn't he?" No one answered, because the truth was too heavy to carry. And while thousands of eyes stayed locked on the empty stage, one figure slipped away in the chaos. Hoodie pulled low, quick steps but calm, too calm, moving like a ghost through the storm. Nobody noticed, nobody stopped him, but within hours his name would dominate every headline in America. Tyler Robinson, 26 years old, no record, no history of violence, barely a trace online, just another anonymous face until now. In less than 48 hours, he would be known everywhere as the man who killed Charlie Kirk. The media firestorm erupted instantly. Phones lit up with breaking news alerts. Anchors cut into live broadcasts with urgent banners in red. Hashtags exploded like wildfire across every platform. Pray for Utah, Justice for Kirk, campus shooting. Helicopters circled overhead. Commentators scrambled to fill the void with speculation. Was it a political assassination, a security failure, a lone attack, or part of something bigger? Nobody had answers, but everyone had opinions. Allies of Kirk called it an attack on freedom. Critics demanded answers about campus security. Parents of students flooded hotlines in a frenzy of fear. And through all the noise, one chilling fact settled in. The shooter had vanished. Imagine being one of those students. One moment you're posting a picture of the guest speaker. The next, you're crouched behind a bench, shaking, wondering if you'll make it home alive. How do you ever sit in a classroom again and pretend it's normal? That night, darkness fell heavy on the city. Police checkpoints choked the highways. Drones hovered over canyons. Tactical teams stormed dorms. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every slammed door made people flinch. But still no suspect. Until a blurry clip surfaced. A security camera, a hooded figure slipping out a side door just seconds after the shot. Detectives froze the frame, zoomed in, enhanced. There it was, a faint metallic gleam, the shape of a black pistol. That same pistol was found hours later, discarded near the stage. Now they had a weapon, but not a name. Investigators tore through student records, license plates, hotel check-ins, traffic cams, hours blurred together over bottomless coffee and exhaustion. Until finally, a partial fingerprint lifted from the abandoned gun lit up their database. And on every glowing screen, a single name appeared. Tyler Robinson, an unknown, armed, and now missing for 14 hours. No phone pings, no credit card swipes, no digital trace at all. It was as if he had planned to vanish, as if he wanted the world to drown in chaos without ever seeing him again. But the net was tightening. A gas station clerk 60 miles south remembered a nervous young man paying cash for water and duct tape. A farmer swore he saw a lone figure cutting across his fields toward the canyon. Helicopters scoured the hills with thermal cameras, searching for a ghost. Back on campus, students lit candles outside the locked gates. Thousands gathered in silence, holding signs, holding hands, holding back tears. Some spoke of Kirk's passion, others of his flaws. But all agreed on one thing: no one deserved to die like that. And yet beneath the grief, something darker was growing. Not just sadness, not just pain, anger, a hunger for justice. The certainty that whoever had done this had to be found and had to pay. The manhunt was no longer local. It was national. FBI, federal marshals, state police. Dozens of agencies moving like one machine, and all of that firepower aimed at a single name. Tyler Robinson, the man who changed history with one shot. And the most haunting part, no one had the faintest idea why. The entire country froze. His name rolled across every news crawl, filled every feed, whispered in every coffee shop. Tyler Robinson. Just days earlier, his face meant nothing. Now it had become the face of fear itself. The operation to catch him was so massive it felt like a Hollywood movie. Highways blocked, helicopters combing mountain ridges, police checkpoints choking every intersection. The FBI, federal marshals, even elite National Guard units fanned out as if hunting an international terrorist. But here's the chilling detail: Tyler wasn't running. He didn't act like a man desperate to save himself. He moved like someone following a plan he had rehearsed 100 times before. 33 hours after the shot that silenced Charlie Kirk, the chase ended on a lonely desert highway. A battered sedan swerved erratically under the glare of high beams. Unmarked SUVs boxed it in with precision. Tires screeched, glass shattered, guns raised. And then Tyler Robinson lay face down on the asphalt. He didn't fight, he didn't scream, he didn't even try to run. He just let them cuff him with a calm that chilled even the agents making the arrest. As if this, too, was part of his design. And that's when the real question was born. Who was this man, really? Because what they found next would change everything. Agents described him as thin, disheveled hoodie, blank face, wrists bound tight behind his back. No rage in his eyes, no fear, just emptiness, like his mind had disconnected from reality hours earlier. Was this really the face of the man who killed one of the most influential political voices in America? Or was there something far stranger behind it? The interrogation began under the weight of nationwide frenzy. Tyler was hauled to Orem Police Headquarters, escorted by dozens of officers who looked more nervous than their prisoner. The room was a gray box, one metal table, one camera blinking in the corner. He sat, chains rattling against the floor. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't ask for water, didn't even ask where he was, just stared at the wall for hours. Detectives tried everything. Gentle tones, psychological pressure, insults, threats, questions about his family, about Kirk, about politics, nothing. Tyler stayed silent, as if their words were spoken in a language he had never learned. Now imagine being one of those detectives. You're face to face with the man the entire country hates. the presumed assassin of a national figure, and all you get back is a void. What do you feel? Rage, frustration, or the creeping suspicion that something much bigger is hiding behind those hollow eyes? At 3:17 a.m., the silence broke. One detective, exhausted, slammed his notebook on the table and barked the question everyone else had been avoiding. Do you even care that you killed a man? Tyler's head tilted slowly, mechanically, like a rusted machine creaking to life. And then, for the first time, he spoke. I had to... 2 words, barely above a whisper, but in that room they detonated like a grenade. He didn't say he was sorry, didn't say it was an accident, didn't say he was crazy. He repeated it. I had to... The tension in the room strangled the air. If it wasn't rage, then what was it? A mission, a belief, a command. Detectives leaned in. Why, Kirk, why that day? Who told you to do this? Tyler's answer was as cryptic as it was chilling. You'll find it, it's all there. And then he sank back into silence. Those words set off a storm, because if there was something there, it had to be found. And when they uncovered it, the truth was darker than anyone could have imagined. In the trunk of his sedan, hidden under a false panel, they found a small locked metal box. Inside were 5 objects. A USB drive. A printed photo of Charlie Kirk, marked with a red X. A university calendar with specific days circled. A folded map with red roots drawn across it. And a notebook page covered in tiny, cramped handwriting. What looked like just paper was, in reality, a manifesto, but not the kind of unhinged rant you'd expect from an extremist. No all-caps fury, no desperate scribbles. This was cold, meticulous, calculated. It spoke of eliminating a threat to the future, of silencing the noise before it spreads, of resetting the signal. And in the corner, almost like a last-minute note scrawled at the end, one single line chilled investigators to the bone. They will call it murder, they won't understand its mercy. Mercy, that one word changed everything, because it didn't sound like hate. It sounded like a man who believed he was saving the world. The USB drive went deeper. Hundreds of diary entries, digital logs stretching over months. Tyler dissecting every speech Charlie Kirk had ever given, breaking down each word, each gesture, each tweet, writing about hidden patterns in Kirk's delivery, claiming that between the applause were signals, that Kirk's voice wasn't a man's voice at all, but a device designed to infect. Yes, that's what he called it. An infection. In his notes, Tyler wrote about voices in his head, words he claimed weren't his, nights without sleep, strange hallucinations, scribbled confessions like, I wake up with words in my head that don't belong to me. Or, he isn't a man, he's a trigger. So was he losing his mind? Or was someone else pulling the strings? Psychologists who later reviewed the writings called them textbook signs of paranoid delusion. But there were details no one could explain. Tyler knew things he had no business knowing. Exact dates of events that hadn't yet been announced. Security movements that were never public. Names of people he had never met, but who were real. Where did he get that information? This was no longer just a murder case. What had looked like the act of a lone gunman began to feel like something bigger. A web of clues, symbols, key phrases. As if Tyler Robinson wasn't just a shooter, but the smallest piece in a game much larger than him. And while investigators pushed deeper into that darkness, the world watched with morbid fascination. Every new leak, every rumor went viral, and one question echoed everywhere. What if Tyler Robinson wasn't insane? What if he was telling the truth? The country split in two. Outside the courthouse, the streets boiled over, protesters demanding the death penalty. Others screaming at police, accusing them of incompetence. The air itself felt heavy, thick with grief, rage, and fear. Meanwhile, television cameras never stopped. They clustered at the courthouse doors like vultures, zooming in on every face, hungry for headlines. To the media, Tyler Robinson wasn't just a killer. He was a human enigma turned spectacle. But inside his cell, Tyler seemed detached, barely ate, never spoke, never asked questions. He sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, head bowed, as if meditating while the world above him burned. And that stillness, that unnatural calm, was more terrifying than violence ever could be. Think about it, what scares you more? A man who kills in blind rage, screaming, thrashing, consumed by fury. Or a man who kills with patience, with calculation, with absolute calm. The day of the trial arrived like an earthquake everyone had seen coming. Every network wanted the first image of the chained man who had shot Charlie Kirk in cold blood. Commentators bickered endlessly. Was he insane? A fanatic? A terrorist? No one could agree. But under all the noise, one unspoken fear was beginning to take shape. What if Tyler Robinson believed he could do it again? Security at the trial was unprecedented. Metal detectors at every door, armed guards in every hall, snipers on rooftops. The courthouse transformed into a fortress. And still, the crowd lined up in the streets, desperate to catch even the faintest glimpse of the man who had stopped America in its tracks. Then the unexpected happened. The doors opened. Tyler Robinson entered the courtroom, and instantly silence. No reporters shouted questions. No protesters screamed insults. Nothing. Just silence. Tyler walked forward, chains clinking softly with each step. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't glance at the cameras, didn't even raise his eyes to the judge. He simply sat down at the defense table. And then he did something no one expected. He smiled. Not a smirk, not mocking, not defiant. It was faint, almost sad. A smile that looked like relief. As if he were saying to himself, finally, it's over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The prosecution laid out their case with surgical precision. The gun, the fingerprints, the diaries, the manifesto, the security footage. Every piece pointed to the same story. Tyler Robinson had planned the assassination for months. He executed it with composure. He did it because he believed it was his duty. But then came the moment no one saw coming. The judge asked the standard procedural question. Mr. Robinson, do you wish to make any statement regarding the charges against you? For the first time since his arrest, Tyler lifted his head. His eyes scanned the room slowly, deliberately, as if memorizing every face. And what was in his expression wasn't anger or fear. It was curiosity. The kind of detached curiosity a scientist might show while studying insects under glass. And then he spoke. You were never supposed to see me. The words crashed through the silence like thunder. His defense attorney froze, the prosecutor scowled, the judge stiffened in her seat. Tyler continued. I'm not what you think, I'm noise. A pattern, I'm changing the frequencies. I heard it, I felt it. He tapped his temple twice with 2 fingers. You were changing too. I was doing it with you. A chill spread through the gallery. Someone whispered under their breath, what the hell? Tyler smiled faintly. He infected the air. He infected the words. If I hadn't stopped him, you wouldn't even be you anymore. The courtroom froze. No objections, no outbursts, just silence. The kind of silence that crawls over your skin like static electricity. Then the chaos hit. Reporters typing frantically on their phones, tweets flying across the world in real time. The prosecutor shot to his feet, objecting furiously that Tyler's rambling was paranoid delusion, irrelevant to the case. But the judge raised her hand to silence him, because she had seen something no one else wanted to admit. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't incoherent rage. This was conviction. Tyler Robinson believed every single word he said. For over 30 minutes, he spoke calmly, almost academically, explaining how Charlie Kirk's speeches carried hidden signals, how the audience's laughter created vibrations that altered emotions, how students' eyes would flicker like static screens after listening to him. He described how he tracked these patterns through live streams, clips on social media, recorded conferences. And the most disturbing part, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't crying, he wasn't unhinged. He sounded like a man giving the weather report. So what do you do when a man kills someone and claims, calmly, rationally, that he did it to save everyone from something no one else can see? The jury sat stiff as stone, some wide-eyed, others biting their lips to mask their unease. But deep down, they were all asking the same terrifying question. If he believes this so completely, what would stop him from killing again? The defense reacted instantly. His lawyer leapt to his feet, nearly frantic, arguing that his client was clearly suffering from paranoid delusions and should be evaluated for mental incompetence. The judge granted a recess. Tyler was escorted out, still calm, still faintly smiling. But what everyone carried with them wasn't the prosecution's evidence. It wasn't the lawyer's plea. It was that image. A thin young man in chains, speaking about frequencies and patterns, convinced he had killed not a man, but something else. And in the courthouse corridors, as his words replayed on every TV broadcast, a new doubt began to spread like a virus. Was Tyler Robinson insane, or was he telling the truth? When court resumed, the atmosphere had changed. The edges of the courtroom felt darker, as if the tension itself had swallowed the light. Tyler Robinson no longer looked like the disheveled young man dragged out of a sedan. Dressed sharply now, hair neatly combed, he seemed like a different person entirely. A man who knew how to hold a jury's gaze, how to wield silence like a weapon. And the most unsettling part was this: people were listening. When he spoke of his childhood, his isolation, his constant sense of being unreal, the room listened. When he described the first time he heard Charlie Kirk, saying it felt like being pulled into someone else's dream, a murmur rippled through the gallery. One juror even leaned forward. "You don't understand," he said softly, voice low but clear enough to reach every corner of the room. He wasn't changing opinions, he was changing people. The prosecution watched in disbelief. They had evidence stacked high, diaries, weapons, fingerprints, but none of it mattered if Tyler could bend the perception of 12 jurors. His calm, precise cadence was more dangerous than any manifesto. Every time someone listened to him, Tyler continued, something disappeared, a memory, a name, a spark in their eyes. I saw it happen again and again. You didn't notice because you were inside the pattern. I saw it from the outside. The air grew heavy. The jury sat frozen. The public leaned forward. Reporters typed furiously, live-streaming every word. Then Tyler leaned in, lips curled into that faint, unnerving smile. "If you were the only one who could see it, wouldn't you stop it too?" The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It wasn't dismissal. It was doubt. And doubt in a courtroom is poison. The prosecution knew it. In minutes, Tyler had turned the trial into a stage and the jury into his audience. But no one could have predicted what came next. Tyler was mid-sentence, his voice smooth and persuasive, when suddenly it stopped. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes blinked slowly, too slowly, like the world itself had thickened around him. The jury noticed first. A woman in the gallery gasped. Someone whispered, "What's happening to him?" And then Tyler collapsed. The thud of his body hitting the floor cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. Papers flew, chairs screeched. The entire room erupted into chaos. His lawyer rushed to him, slapping his face, shouting his name. Tyler didn't respond. His body twisted violently, convulsions slamming his head against the floor in a sickening rhythm. Foam bubbled from his mouth. His eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Screams filled the courtroom. The judge pounded the gavel again and again, demanding order that no one could give. Jurors stood, backing away in fear. A woman in the gallery shrieked and bolted for the door. Paramedics stormed in with a stretcher. Security guards tried to carve a path through the chaos. The room was an inferno of panic. And in the center of it, Tyler Robinson writhed on the floor like something invisible was burning him alive from the inside. The live feed of the trial didn't take long to leak. Within minutes, millions of Americans were watching Tyler collapse in real time. Some claimed it was epilepsy. Others said it was suicide by poison. But the conspiracy crowd had their own explanation. They're silencing him. The paramedics stabilized him, strapping him to the gurney, oxygen mask tight across his face. As they wheeled him out, one camera caught something the world would not forget. Tyler's lips moved. No sound came out, but lip readers agreed. The word was reset. The clip exploded across the internet. Millions of replays, endless speculation. Reset what? The trial, the country, himself? No one knew. The government tried to control the narrative, releasing a statement that Tyler had suffered a psychological breakdown and was being transferred to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. But it was too late. The genie was out. The word had escaped. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Protesters clashed. Some shouted that Tyler was faking. Others swore they had just witnessed something beyond medicine. And through it all, the image of Tyler, strapped to a stretcher, unconscious, whispering reset, became a symbol. To some, he was the poisoned prophet. To others, the convulsive fraud. But everyone agreed on one thing: the mystery was now bigger than the murder. Because even on a stretcher, Tyler Robinson had seized control of the story. If his delusions were lies, how had he bent the entire nation around them? And if they were true, what did reset really mean? The trial was suspended, but the obsession had only begun. Online, the question multiplied. What if Tyler Robinson wasn't insane? The footage of his collapse looped endlessly on every channel. Slowed down edits, memes, conspiracy breakdowns linking his convulsions to his earlier testimony about frequencies and patterns. Every repetition deepened the unease. And then, something unexpected began to ripple across the country. Public opinion shifted. Not a tidal wave, just a tremor, but enough to terrify the prosecution. Comment threads filled with a new refrain. Maybe he's not just a killer. Maybe he's broken. Maybe he's sick. Maybe he's as much a victim as Charlie Kirk. Compassion. The prosecutors feared it more than anything, because compassion was a crack in the dam, and cracks split verdicts. 3 days later, Tyler returned to court, pale, thin, but smiling faintly, eyes unnervingly bright. He was wheeled in, lifted into his chair, and turned to the gallery. And he waved, like a celebrity returning from vacation. The silence in the courtroom was total. The judge leaned forward, her voice cold and steady. "Mr. Robinson, do you feel fit to continue with these proceedings?" Tyler nodded, steady as stone. His voice was stronger than anyone expected. "Yes." And that's when the defense played its card. They announced they would change his plea, not guilty by reason of insanity. The gallery erupted, gasps, murmurs, reporters scrambling for their phones. The prosecutors slammed their folders shut, faces red with fury. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Tyler just folded his hands, smiling, as if this had been the plan all along. The trial shifted on its axis. It was no longer about what Tyler had done. It was about what he was. And that question was infinitely more dangerous. They talked about compassion, about how broken a man must be to reach that point. How maybe Tyler Robinson was as much a victim of his own mind as Charlie Kirk was of the bullet. That crack, as small as it seemed, could split a verdict wide open. 3 days later, Tyler returned to court in a wheelchair, pale, thinner, but his faint smile was still there and his eyes bright, steady, unshakable. He raised his hand and waved at the gallery like a celebrity returning from vacation. The room froze in silence. The judge asked if he was fit to continue. Tyler nodded calmly. "Stronger than ever," he replied. That's when the defense played their most dangerous card. They changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. The gallery erupted. Gasps, murmurs, prosecutors slammed their hands against the table. The judge's eyebrows lifted in surprise, and Tyler just sat there, hands folded in his lap, smiling as if this too had been part of the plan all along. The axis of the trial shifted. It was no longer about what Tyler had done. It was about what Tyler was. The defense called psychologists to the stand. They dissected his journals, his recordings, his mutterings about frequencies and patterns. They spoke of delusional psychosis, dissociative states, a mind fractured by obsession and isolation. They painted him as a man incapable of distinguishing right from wrong at the moment he pulled the trigger. But the prosecution answered with knives. They laid out the meticulous planning, the legal purchase of the weapon months earlier, the hours of private training at a shooting range, the fake plates, the rehearsed getaway. They showed how he wore gloves, cleaned the pistol, and planted it in a specific place to mislead the investigation. Every step was cold, precise, rational. "This isn't madness," the prosecutor said, slamming his journals onto the table, pages fluttering like dead birds. "This is murder." And then came the final twist. Tyler stood. He wasn't supposed to. The judge barked at him to sit. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve. He ignored them both. "I just want you to know," he said softly, almost tenderly, "it's finished." The room froze. "Finished what?" the judge demanded, brows knitting. Tyler's lips curved into the smallest smile. "You'll see." Then he sat down again, as calm as a man who knew a secret no one else could understand. The jurors stared at him like they were looking at a ghost. That image, calm, smiling, confident even at the edge of sentencing, burned itself into every mind like a knife. And then came the moment everyone had dreaded. After weeks of revelations, collapses, and cryptic testimony, the 12 jurors returned. They moved like shadows, pale-faced, unreadable. The air was electric, fragile, the kind of silence that exists before lightning strikes. The judge broke it with her voice. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman rose, hands trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." Time stopped. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty." The gallery erupted. Gasps, cries, hands clutched over mouths. The judge's gavel pounded for order, but the room was chaos, a whirlwind of disbelief and fear. And in the middle of it all, Tyler Robinson remained motionless, upright, serene, that faint smile never leaving his lips. As if he had known all along. The hammer of justice fell like a guillotine. Guilty on every count: first-degree murder, firearm use, flight from the scene, reckless endangerment. Each word struck like a hammer, and yet Tyler didn't flinch. He looked less like a man receiving a life sentence than someone listening to the score of a game he already knew the outcome of. What was chilling wasn't just his calm, it was what came next. As the judge thanked the jurors for their service, Tyler leaned forward just slightly. No one heard him speak, but 3 jurors swore they saw his lips form a single word. "Free." A cold shiver ran down their spines, one that wouldn't fade for days. How could a man sentenced to life without parole look freer than everyone else in that room? The bailiffs lifted him to his feet. Chains rattled softly against the floor. "Tyler James Robinson," the judge said, voice hard as stone, "you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Applause burst from the gallery, shouts of justice. Someone screamed he should rot in hell. Another sobbed, whispering finally. But Tyler didn't flinch. He simply nodded, then spoke 2 words that landed like bombs. "Thank you." He said it softly, gently, like a guest thanking his host after dinner. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the judge froze, lips parted in disbelief. "Thank you," Tyler repeated. "Yes, now it's done." The words echoed through the courtroom like a phantom whisper. Now it's done. The bailiffs dragged him toward the side door. Reporters screamed questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd hurled curses. And just before he disappeared behind the heavy steel door, Tyler turned his head slightly toward the light and smiled. Not the faint, melancholic smile of before, but wide, bright, unsettlingly human. And those closest swore they heard him whisper something else. Too soft for the microphones, but enough to chill their blood. "You'll see." Then the door slammed shut. Tyler Robinson vanished into the belly of the prison system. Outside, the crowd exploded like a volcano. Protests, applause, raised fists, Tears. News helicopters circling as anchors called it a historic verdict, a warning to extremists, the end of a dark chapter. But even as they said it, everyone knew this wasn't the end. Because Tyler's smile had already lodged itself in the nation's collective memory, like a splinter that could never be removed. Inside the armored van, Tyler was chained to the floor. The guards kept their distance, stealing wary glances but never looking him in the eye. He sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the wall as if none of this belonged to him at all. And then, almost too quiet to notice, he began to hum. A low, uneven tone, like static bleeding through an old radio. "Cut it out," one guard barked. Tyler stopped and smiled. The transfer to Utah State Prison took 47 minutes. In that entire time, he didn't speak another word. Processing was routine: fingerprints, photos, DNA swab, gray uniform. By 11:23 p.m., the heavy steel door slammed shut on his cell. Concrete, iron, silence. Tyler lay back on the thin mattress, hands folded neatly over his chest, eyes wide open in the dark. His lips moved softly, whispering something no one could hear. "It's beginning." If anyone had heard it, the world might have frozen, because the question that had haunted the nation since that day on campus still hadn't been answered. Had Tyler Robinson finished something, or had he only just started? The silence in his cell was different. That's what one guard would later report. It wasn't the restless quiet of a prison filled with coughs, curses, and clanging. It was heavy, suspended, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Most inmates scream on their first night. Cry, rage, beg. Not Tyler, he smiled. And that, more than the shot, more than the trial, more than the collapse in court, was what unsettled the staff most. Because killers don't smile like that. Fanatics don't smile like that. Only men who believe they've completed a mission. From the very first moment, Tyler was an anomaly. He complied with every order calmly, politely, spoke in a quiet, measured voice. He didn't curse, didn't protest, didn't resist. He acted less like a man entering prison for life and more like a guest checking into a hotel. But the most disturbing part came later. He began talking. Not to guards, not to inmates, to himself. Murmuring for hours on end, eyes closed, lips moving in a continuous whisper. No one could make out the words. The guards started calling it the transmission. "It's like he's sending a message," one said to the warden. "And the worst part, it doesn't sound like it's meant for anyone here." When confronted, Tyler would only smile and reply, "You're not supposed to hear it, not yet." Not yet. Those two words spread through the prison like a virus. Inmates whispered them in the chow line. Guards avoided his block. His calm became the enigma no one could shake, because everyone had seen him lose control in court. Everyone had watched him convulse, foam at the mouth, collapse like a puppet with cut strings. But here in the silent cell, he looked stronger, more complete. As if the real story hadn't ended with the verdict, but had only just begun. Even the warden had to admit in an official report, Robinson's behavior was nonviolent but persistently disturbing. Most men in prison broke down: rage, depression, despair. Tyler seemed to thrive in the stillness, as if the gray walls fed him instead of crushed him. Outside, the world kept spinning in a storm of grief and fury. Charlie Kirk's funeral drew thousands: politicians, celebrities, students, his family. The procession was broadcast live nationwide, the casket covered in flowers, flags waving like somber candles in dead wind, speeches about legacy, passion, and how evil had silenced him. It was meant to close a wound. But even there, in the middle of mourning, whispers of Tyler floated like smoke. Analysts debated whether his courtroom collapse had been staged. Psychiatrists argued over whether his talk of signals was delusion or metaphor. And the more they tried to dissect him, the less sense he made. Then came the leak. His psychiatric evaluation. It described him as lucid, highly intelligent, no signs of active psychosis, but the final line froze everyone who read it. The subject shows a complete absence of remorse and an unshakable conviction that his actions were necessary, but incomplete. Incomplete. That word hit like gasoline on a fire. What did he mean by that? In the ambulance, he'd whispered complete. In the courtroom, he'd said now it's done. But now the doctors claimed he believed he hadn't finished. So what was left? Inside his cell, Tyler kept smiling. They assigned him work in the prison laundry, folding uniforms, stacking them into perfect towers. He did it with surgical precision, humming that same low, static-like tone under his breath. Other inmates avoided him. Some tried intimidation. They stopped after a single look into his eyes, cold, steady, unreadable. One lifer who'd stabbed 2 men put it simply, "He's the creepiest guy I've ever met." Tyler never fought, never cursed, never flinched. He just watched. And then one night, something happened that froze the blood of every guard on duty. During a routine round, one officer peered through the small window of Tyler's cell. What he saw locked him in place. Tyler wasn't sleeping. He was standing dead center in the room, arms hanging loosely at his sides, eyes wide open, glassy. And all around him, covering the walls, were dozens of tiny marks. Straight, perfect lines etched into the concrete with something sharp. Hundreds of them laid out with precision, forming a pattern, not graffiti, not random scratches. A circuit. The guard fumbled with his keys, opened the door, and barked at him to stop. Tyler turned his head slowly, like an old machine grinding back to life. "Don't erase it." "That's not allowed," the guard stammered. Tyler smiled faintly. "It's not graffiti, it's a map." "A map of what?" Tyler tilted his head, the way a teacher does when a student misses the obvious. "Of what comes next." At dawn, the cell was searched top to bottom. No tools, no contraband, nothing to explain how the lines had been carved. The walls were repainted. The next morning, the marks were back. Not carved this time, drawn in soap, identical, perfectly replicated. The warden began losing sleep. Something in those lines didn't feel random. They repeated, symmetrical, a code waiting to be cracked. The prison psychiatrist warned that allowing him to continue would only reinforce his delusions. But it was the chaplain who muttered something that chilled the room to silence. What if they're not delusions to him? What if they're instructions? Outside, Tyler's face refused to vanish from public life. If anything, it multiplied. Protests flared across college campuses. Some demanded tighter security. Others shouted that Kirk's own rhetoric had birthed the monster that killed him. Congress opened hearings on political extremism and campus safety. And through every news ticker, every headline, every panel of talking heads, there he was. Tyler Robinson, calm, silent, a ghost haunting the screens. People stopped calling him the killer. They started calling him the believer. The name stuck. Because more than a villain, Tyler looked like a man convinced he'd carried out a mission. And that, for many, was far more terrifying. 3 months into his sentence, something changed. At 2:17 a.m., a guard doing rounds heard something new from Tyler's cell. Not the usual low hum. Singing. A thin, wavering melody out of tune, like a lullaby sung underwater. The guard froze, goosebumps prickling his arms. "Hey," he called. Tyler stopped, slowly turned his head. His eyes caught the faint flicker of the fluorescent light, glinting wet like glass. "It's beginning," he whispered. The guard swallowed hard. "What's beginning?" Tyler stared straight into him. "Listen." The guard leaned in, straining. Nothing. Just the buzz of the overhead lights, the distant snores of inmates. "I don't hear anything," he muttered. "You will," Tyler said calmly, "when it gets to you." Then he lay down, rolled to the wall, and shut his eyes. The guard backed away, his heartbeat pounding like a hammer. He tried to shake the chill crawling his spine, but he couldn't, because as he walked back down the corridor, he realized something that froze him to the marrow. Other inmates were humming. Low, subtle, almost imperceptible. But there, a strange murmur spreading like an echo. At first it was faint, a hum in the showers, a drone at the chow hall. Guards brushed it off as boredom imitation, but it didn't stop. It grew. By the second week, whole wings of the prison vibrated with that same low, steady tone. Not a song, not words, just one endless note, deep, constant, like the hum of a faraway engine. And the most disturbing part? Many of them didn't even realize they were doing it, lips moving barely unconsciously while they walked the halls, while they lifted weights, while they slept. The entire prison was becoming an echo chamber for Tyler Robinson. What began as a murmur in forgotten corners was, by the fourth week, a wave crashing down every corridor. Inmates humming in the yard, humming as they benched iron, humming with tears in their eyes, telling guards they couldn't stop. "I wake up doing it," one lifer whispered, trembling. "It's stuck in my skull." "I wake up doing it," one lifer told a guard, eyes glassy. "It's like it's stuck in my skull." Every time someone asked where it started, the answer was always the same: Robinson. Inside his cell, Tyler sat cross-legged, eyes closed, humming softly like a human tuning fork. Motionless, calm, as if the storm spreading around him didn't touch him at all. But the guards noticed, the warden noticed, and by the third week the hum was bleeding into everyone's sanity. Inmates started fighting for no reason. Sleep deprivation spread like an infection. Several complained of crushing headaches. Others said they felt vibrations in their bones. One man slammed his cell window until his fists bled, screaming, "Get him out of here, he's in my head." Two more inmates began carving lines into their walls. Not graffiti, not curses, straight, cold, perfect, exactly like the marks Tyler had scratched weeks earlier. The warden called an emergency meeting. Security chiefs, psychiatrists, the chaplain, nobody had answers. "This isn't normal contagion," the prison psychiatrist said, his voice trembling. "It's not simple mimicry, it's ritual, symbolic cohesion around one figure." The warden leaned forward. "Are you saying he's forming a cult?" The psychiatrist didn't blink. "No, warden, I'm saying he already has one." They tried isolating him, moved him to a solitary wing. No contact, no shared spaces. But the hum didn't stop. It grew louder. And that's when things crossed into the impossible. Clandestine recordings began leaking. A grainy cell phone video from the yard showed dozens of inmates walking in slow circles, heads bowed, humming in unison. And at the far end by the fence stood Tyler, silent, motionless, watching. That video spread like wildfire. In hours, the Robinson tone was trending worldwide. Millions imitated it as a joke, but some never stopped. Comments poured in. "I hummed it all day, and I swear my chest is vibrating. Can't sleep without it now. It's like it tells me to keep going." Psychologists called it mass behavioral echoing. The media brushed it off as a fad. But in the darker corners of the internet, a new name surfaced: the signal. And then someone remembered his words in court, about frequencies, about hidden patterns in noise. Suddenly, what once sounded like paranoid rambling began to feel like prophecy. What if this wasn't random? What if Tyler had planned to spread something from the very beginning? Inside the prison, the situation was collapsing. The chaplain stopped showing up. Veteran guards called in sick, citing nervous breakdowns. A few whispered that they heard voices at night, buried under the hum. "Not words," one officer said, voice shaking. "Intentions." The psychiatrist begged to have Tyler transferred to a federal mental health facility. The warden refused. "If we move him, we lose the narrative." But the truth was, they'd already lost it. One night, surveillance cameras caught something no one could explain. Tyler stood in the center of his cell, arms outstretched, eyes closed. The mic picked up the hum. But not just from him, from everywhere. The walls, the air, the floor itself. It grew, swelling like a storm. The lights flickered, then the entire prison wing vibrated in perfect sync. And every window shattered at once. Sirens screamed, inmates howled, guards scattered, and in the middle of the chaos, Tyler stood untouched. Smiling, That footage never reached the press. It was buried deep in restricted archives. But rumors leaked, and the myth of Tyler Robinson, the assassin-turned-prophet, only grew stronger. Outside, society was fracturing. Turning Point USA tried to reorganize, but every rally drowned in protests chanting about the signal. Universities banned large political events, citing a post-Kirk paranoia sweeping across campuses. And still the hum spread. Clips surfaced everywhere. Teenagers humming in classrooms, factory workers droning in unison on assembly lines, commuters swaying gently in subway cars as if possessed by the same low vibration. Nobody organized it, nobody explained it. But it was happening. And always, whenever someone traced the origin of a video, the same detail appeared. Tiny, perfect lines scratched into desks, etched into walls, drawn in condensation on windows. The same map Tyler had carved in his cell. The warden on the edge of collapse finally gave in. Tyler Robinson was to be transferred to a federal psychiatric facility in Nevada, buried under miles of desert. Maximum security. No cameras, no microphones. The move was scheduled for dawn. At 4:12 a.m., they went to get him. The cell was empty. No broken doors, no tunnels, no signs of a struggle, just absence. On the mattress, drawn in his own dried blood, were 3 words. It has begun. The prison went into full lockdown. Sirens screamed. Helicopters sliced through the sky. Highways were blocked for 50 miles in every direction. They found nothing. No footprints. No sightings. No explanation. Tyler Robinson, convicted murderer sentenced to life without parole, had vanished. The architect of chaos, of the hum, of the myth, gone from a maximum security cell without opening a door. The impossible had happened, and the worst part was that nobody could explain it. Outside, the world was already humming. At first it looked like a fad, a nervous joke. A soft, low, steady note whispered under breath. But the question nobody dared ask was the simplest one. What if it wasn't a game? What if they'd been waiting for it? Disappearances happen, transfers fail, paperwork gets lost. Most people wanted to bury Tyler Robinson in that empty cell forever. Erase him, close the wound, move on. But Tyler didn't stay buried. He began whispering again, not in person, in patterns. 2 days after his disappearance, a shortwave radio operator in rural Idaho picked up a strange transmission. A 17-second low tone. 5 seconds of silence. Then the tone again. For an hour it repeated, then silence. At first the operator thought it was interference, until it returned the next night, and the next. First Idaho, then Maine, then Alaska, then France, always the same signal. Desperate for answers, he posted the spectrograms online. That was the spark. Within hours, conspiracy forums were ablaze. The pattern wasn't random. It matched the hum, the exact frequency already known as the Robinson tone. Experts mocked it, called it mass hysteria, pareidolia, humans finding order in noise. But beneath the laughter in the dark corners of the web, something else surfaced. Coordinates. Some claimed the pulses translated into numbers. Numbers that, when mapped, pointed to real places, deserts, abandoned factories, isolated mountaintops, places with nothing in common. Or maybe everything. They called them activation sites. Most laughed it off, memes spread. Until someone went to one. An urban explorer in Nevada followed a set of coordinates into the desert. He filmed himself approaching a rusted-out military radio tower, long abandoned. Except it wasn't dead. In the background, faint but undeniable, the hum. The video hit 30 million views in 3 days. The world stopped laughing. The FBI raided the explorer's home. His channel disappeared from every platform. His friends said he stopped answering calls. And then came the first real disappearance. The guard who had found Tyler's empty cell vanished from his house in Utah. The front door stood open, lights on, dinner half-eaten on the table. On the floor, carved deep with something sharp, were hundreds of straight, perfect lines, just like the ones in Tyler's cell. And on the wall, sprayed in red, "He is not gone." That same phrase had appeared in the margins of Tyler's notebooks. The same idea he'd whispered in court, that Charlie Kirk wasn't persuading people, he was rewriting them. That his words carried a frequency, a code. Tyler had said he had to stop it. But maybe he hadn't stopped it at all. Maybe he had only replaced it with his own. And if that was true, then Tyler Robinson wasn't trying to disappear. He was trying to be everywhere. Governments panicked. Quietly, they launched task forces. Black SUVs combed the desert highways. Old Cold War radar stations flickered back to life. Satellites scanned for human-shaped heat signatures that left no tracks. They found nothing. No Tyler. No signal source. Just the hum. And the hum was growing. In bus stops, in high school gyms, in stadiums where children as young as 5 swayed in their seats, glassy-eyed, humming the same low tone. Teachers froze in terror. Parents dragged their kids out of classrooms. Cities banned gatherings larger than 50, not out of fear of violence, but because crowds hummed. It wasn't about Tyler Robinson, the man. It was Tyler Robinson, the signal, the pattern. And then came the discovery in Utah. Inside the courthouse where Tyler had been sentenced, a janitor found something carved into the witness stand. The very place Tyler had stood to deliver his strange, measured testimony. The wood was covered in hundreds of tiny, perfect lines. A circuit, a map, and in the center, etched so deep it split the grain of the oak, one word. Pattern. The janitor quit the next day. He didn't finish his shift. He didn't pick up his paycheck. He simply walked out, left his keys on the security desk, and drove until the courthouse was nothing but a speck in the rearview mirror. Because when he closed his eyes, the lines pulsed. And in the silence of night, he dreamed of Tyler Robinson standing in the corner of his bedroom, smiling. Whispered once in court, accusing Charlie Kirk of rewriting people with his speeches. Maybe Tyler hadn't stopped it. Maybe he'd simply replaced it with his own pattern. And if that was true, Tyler Robinson wasn't trying to disappear. He was trying to be everywhere. Governments responded in desperation. Long-dead Cold War radar stations blinked to life. Satellites swept deserts and mountain ranges. Special forces combed abandoned factories and empty military bases. They found nothing. No Tyler. No body. No trace. Only the hum. You could hear it at bus stops, in empty stadiums, in kindergarten classrooms where 5-year-old children swayed gently, humming under their breath with glassy eyes while teachers stood frozen in terror. It wasn't about the man anymore. It was about the signal. Tyler Robinson had become the pattern. One night back inside the very courthouse where he'd been sentenced, something impossible to ignore appeared. A janitor, wiping down the witness stand, froze when he saw the wood covered in tiny, perfect lines, etched circuits running like veins through the grain. At the center, carved so deep it split the oak. Pattern. The janitor quit on the spot, left his keys on the desk, walked out, and never came back. Later, he told his family that when he closed his eyes, the lines moved. They pulsed. And in his dreams, Tyler Robinson stood in the corner of his bedroom, smiling. By then, the impact had already reshaped the world. Universities canceled all mass events indefinitely. Political rallies vanished. Even concerts saw their ticket sales collapse. Nobody wanted to stand in crowds anymore, because crowds hummed. The Kirk family locked themselves behind armored doors, guarded day and night. Every attempt to resurrect Turning Point USA dissolved into chaos, students freezing mid-speech, humming softly as cameras rolled in horror. Sponsors pulled out. Finally, the website went dark, replaced by a single black page with white text. The noise is gone. No one claimed responsibility. Some said it was hackers, others whispered it was Tyler. And just when it felt like everything had turned to ash, something new began. Envelopes, no return address. delivered to newsrooms, TV stations, even the private mailboxes of judges and congressmen. Inside each one, a single sheet of paper covered in tiny, perfect lines, identical to the marks in Tyler's prison cell. At the bottom, always the same message. The pattern is in motion. The question was no longer who Tyler Robinson was. The question was what he had left behind. Because if he had rewritten the noise, if he had turned his hum into the world's new invisible language, then maybe it no longer mattered where he was. Maybe in some way he was already everywhere. And tonight, when you close your eyes, ask yourself something. That low hum, barely audible, almost hidden under your breathing. Is it just you? Or is it the echo of Tyler Robinson,